The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Well, welcome back to another edition of TechBytes. And this, I would say, would be one of my favorite types of conversations to have, because it's about technology and innovation, but not necessarily in our industries. And it's always great to compare notes with somebody who's passionate about it, but who's also seeing the world in it. So to our conversation today is AJ Francavilla, who is the Vice President of Digital and Innovation for North America for Sodexo. So welcome to TechBytes.
Hey, Rob. Nice to be back with you. I think we had some great conversations at CES and NRF, so excited to bring that back to life here and share some insight.
We did, but I didn't want to get too far deep into it because it's always better to just sort of talk about it here. So just so you know, in the past, we've had perhaps some people who work for competitive companies to yours tell us what they might be looking forward to at the two. And this year, unfortunately, because you got to do this, I didn't get to do this, but because of CES and NRF being one ending on the day that the other started, I couldn't make CES this year, which means that you were sort of my eyes and ears, and you're the TechBytes and the IFBTA's eyes and ears here. So that's our conversation here. But generally, we like to think of it as a tale of two cities, because you see tech on one side for the consumer and tech on the retail for the other. So I'm sure it was not your first time there.
It was not. I think it's about my fourth CES and about eighth.
Fourth. So why don't we just start out at the top? Because in your title, you have the word innovation.
Yeah.
So what was the main themes or the innovation this year at CES?
Yeah, so I think on the CES side, you saw a lot more of the convergence of the tech really starting to become more consumer friendly. So a lot of AI was coming to be. We heard a lot more around how we're going to use this data to really enhance the experiences for consumers. So if you think about where you used to have friction in the past of having to manage all these things, we all know ChatGPT, we all know all these AI models. Now it's coming into services like live translation. So we saw a lot of that. We saw some of the more novelty space of robotic cats and pets that are going to interact with you.
They did that the year before, though, because of LiDAR.
Yep. And
they were just showing how that, but that's actually a better maybe technology for things like vehicles, which is more in there right now. But that would be the second year for that one. That I haven't figured out if anybody buys those things or if they're just showing like how much they can do.
Yeah, I think we saw a lot this year around I think in AI loosely, right? Robotics and automation. So you saw the robots becoming more independent in their work. So where you had the robotic vacuums and all those things, those are still there. Those are still proliferating the show floor. But what you saw was now the move into lawn-mowing and pool cleaning and all these other things. So one, you can see that the costs coming down, the capabilities coming up, but that's one side. Then you slip over to the commercialization where you can see it evolving in the future. That's a repetitive task that not a lot of folks want to do, right? So now if you can have this, some of these ancillary services picked up by robotics, that's a win, right? We do food, we do facilities, we do maintenance. We create services for our customers so our key clients can focus on.
Right, but I just want to point out that when they're showing it there, because I've had this experience before, sometimes, especially when it's really, really new innovation, it's not from somebody, who just has a booth every year to show you their next generation of I don't know what, like screens or phones or whatever it is. They weren't necessarily thinking about the industries that we work in. They were coming out for something, and the keyword here is consumer.
Yep.
So, it's more than likely something that was developed that you can buy and use at your home.
Yeah, 100%. I think where we've taken the lens and when we go is what are consumers experiencing at home that they may start wanting to experience in the workplace, experience in their college cafeteria, inside of their hospital, right? So I think a little bit for us is that leading indicator of where's the venture capital, where's the investment, where's the innovation dollars in big corporations going to create these startups, to create these new products. And then you see the slower curve that becomes more commercially feasible downstream.
Well, you start to see the new innovation that's yet to come.
Yeah.
Or the ones who are the startups, because there's startup zones and there's innovation awards. But then you also see the ones that are now officially announced and have just come out. A lot of people wait for that. My theory has always been if it comes out there and it's officially announced, meaning the consumer can go buy it somewhere, then the cost comes down and the pressure is on us because our consumers or guests are going to ask us or expect us to be maybe using those technologies.
Agreed. I mean, I think it's even the same thing with the smart glasses, right? There was a big push around smart glasses again this year, and I would probably say 4 or 5 years ago was the first wave of the clunkier version. You saw the investment with Meta and Ray-Ban around theirs. Then you had Apple Vision Pro come out, and now you've got a lot more of the market readiness of how do we adapt all these investments into something that's a little bit more consumer friendly and applicable. So I think there's some
Were the glasses really there? I mean, where, they've been, as you point out, they've had glasses and watches for many years, and because of the wearables, right? So it frustrated me a year ago that the glasses I felt were at least a year off. And my feeling is today, because I've gone online, obviously, and I've been taking a look to see what I missed, right? But I wanted to see, I still feel like they're a year off, because to me, until you have glasses that just look like glasses and don't have all the bulky stuff on it, just putting a camera in a glass, that's been around for a while.
Yeah.
So, okay, fine. So Ray-Ban, put their name on and they do a nice glass. But, one that really brings up the vision in front of you, almost like the pop-up display I have in my car,
Yeah.
That I can see through it, but I can see what I'm doing, and that I've got that connectivity. Are we there yet for that?
Yeah, I think we saw some in terms of your part of that early release, right? I don't know if they're consumer available just yet. And then you had the market ready ones that are leveraging the cloud with Ray-Ban and Meta and all of those. So I think in terms of the AR ones that are really trying to give you that heads up display style see-through, I'm not sure where they are yet. I think we saw a few partners there that were really getting the kind of the pop in circumstance around, look what's coming, look what we can do. But certainly I don't think I can go order them just yet, because I do think when you look at the kitchens, when you look at some of the spaces we operate in, the more we can get our teams focused and not have distractions or have other things. I mean, it's from a safety play that's huge, from the ability to see, what's next on the kitchen display queue, right? There's some cool things that could happen, but there's still industrialization. There's still change management. A lot of this stuff is that leading indicator for a consumer, which is great, but how do you convert that into good investment ROI back in the restaurant space, right? Food service space, that's still, I think, a few years out.
Well, there's, if you go to CES, it's almost in zones or rooms, right? Because I think they've separated out that they have so much, all those startup and then all of the technology that comes and innovation from other countries is in a space. But you have different areas. So you might have gaming, you have health and fitness, you've got the home.
Yep.
In there. They now have an AARP place, which I find very interesting. Okay. But they've got all of these different areas, but they also have a whole auto show going on there. Yeah. Did you get to walk everything?
Yeah, so we got to go over to the auto side, and I think that one was interesting too, because that's probably where you saw the most kind of industrialization that could be playing in both spaces, right? Because the consumer vehicles are starting to look at what can we do from the AI side around other services, connected vehicles. So you had some folks there that were working on how do you order food as you're approaching your workplace? How do you have food on your way home, right? Do you pick it up on the way? And it's all just more predictive and prompts, which again helps some of the businesses get that return and repeat customer. There's a lot even around the autonomous vehicles. So there were some that were really industrialized. You saw some in farming equipment that was moving to be more industrial. Some airports of the future was a really interesting one around how they can do baggage handling through the automated tugs. So I think that's where you're seeing like the true industrial side outside the consumer space. But there's some big money going into that area around things that I think we can see in a few years out.
Yeah, by the way, what I've found, and because you brought up the automated tugs and stuff like that, an observation that I've had is that people seem to create innovation in silos, and they don't really think about where else it can be. So the second that you said that, I know that Sodexo and some other people that do things on campus have certainly, tested some of the bots that will go that, are autonomous, that can deliver food around the campus. But when you look at automated tugs, you're talking about heavier stuff, and you start to think about, like, for instance, food delivery to multiple dining halls, across, which is much heavier. It's not the same thing. But I bet they didn't necessarily think of it for those kinds of uses, like that. But for you can put that together and say, well, if I can take baggage, from one place to another, or maybe autonomous when students are checking in, they put all their stuff on something. It just, yeah, I don't know, but that's the vision, right?
Well, absolutely. I think, and you think about some of our other spaces, like in healthcare, where we may have patient trays, we may have patient linen, and some of those, I think that the tugs are really applicable there. And we've done some work with them in the past. I think there's really some good use cases in some areas. I think for us, it's really where are we going to add value back to the experience, because we want it to be a frictionless experience for our customers, reducing lift for our clients, and of course, making sure we're meeting consumers where they are, right? We don't want to have to make them always deviate from their path or
Right.
come find us. So in a hospital setting, a college campus, if you're over in a remote part of campus or a remote part of the hospital, how do we get those right services to you? That doesn't always involve, you having to leave your desk, leave your space, come all the way over to the cafe.
Right.
So I
But
think,
let's keep in mind, if something becomes commonplace and consumers are used to using it, that means it becomes less friction for us when we try to adopt those because they're used to it.
yeah,
But if I think also you mentioned about pretty much doing everything from your vehicle. I almost think at some point when we get to fully autonomous vehicles, and I saw one years ago at CES where people just faced each other, they didn't even
yeah,
face forward, right? But they're now doing an entertainment experience. And I think, well, how's that going to be different than having that in my entertainment center at home? Or how's that? Because so maybe there's going to be convergence of technology between what you use in the home and what you use in your vehicle. And again, the silos means different application developers come up with it, but sooner or later somebody says, "Oh, I got this really great thing. Let me put it in the car. Let me put it in the home. Let me put it in your seat back on a plane, in a dorm room,
yeah.
in a hospital room."
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely a lot of that coming in. I think even just how you design the space in terms of the screens, the transparency, the opacity, like how are we creating more kind of the hands-on experiences? Because we're coming out of coming out of the pandemic. It's been quite some time, but folks are trying to like do that reconnection, and they're in this hybrid of I had all this convenience, I had this digital experience, but now how do I get that back to that human piece of it? And there's a fine line, right? Folks still want the convenience, they want the digitization, they want to be able to cut some lines, have some reduce friction, but they also want to be able to say, Rob and I are going to grab a coffee, and how do we bring that back together? So I think as you talk about, like even in the car and you're facing each other, that's bringing the communal experience back together, right? You're focused, you're not worried about the road. And we saw one of the vehicles at CES was one of the new autonomous ones that's just basically skirting around Vegas right now. We were trying to get a free pass, and
Are you talking about skirting around underneath Vegas or around Vegas?
yeah, so it's one of the autonomous above, and you get to face each other. It was one of the
I do that well, I didn't get to face each other in Phoenix,
yeah.
but I went into a Jaguar,
Yep.
which I didn't even know that Jaguar was doing them. I only thought Teslas were doing it, but okay. Um, but yeah, so they're going around and you get to face each other. It's a little bit hard, I'm sure, if you're facing backwards to feel totally comfortable
Some
because you can't
people,
see
I
what's
mean,
ahead.
once it's autonomous, maybe you don't want to be looking ahead. It was a little kind of out of body experience being in the Jaguar, looking and seeing the driver's seat empty and the wheel turning, right? So this next gen one that we saw at the CES show was really just autonomous, right? There was no steering wheel, just four folks in a car, and it was getting to where you need to be.
Not even a steering wheel. Well, that's interesting. But you know what? We do it on planes. We do it on trains
Yeah.
where we sit facing each other. We don't have to look ahead, and see what's going on. We're not flying the plane or the train.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something to be
But I think
learned. And we do it on monorails, right? So
I think it goes back to that part of that. It's kind of that cultural change management too, right? As the technology becomes more ubiquitous, you start experiencing it. I think that comfort level changes, and I think we saw some of that too in the food side of the show. As you saw a little bit more of like the food of the future, alternative proteins, 3D printing of food, right? You're seeing a little bit more around how do we that part of the show is interesting.
now you see, you knew exactly where I was going to go. I was going to say, all right, well, let's bring this. I do understand they had a food service zone. I've been there before. I've seen vending and things. So what are the practical things that we saw? Any specific things that you saw in a food service zone or the food or the new foods? And by the way, just so you know, 2 days ago, I went to Expo West, which is the natural products, and that's all the foods of the future in there, and then NAFM with equipment. So, are there some specific things that you saw that you would highlight that have to do with food service specifically?
Yeah, I think on the consumer side, there are some interesting parts, right? One of them, and we've tried it a few years in a row now, to your point of is it industrial, is it out there, was how do you change flavor profiles? How do you reduce sodium or certain flavors inside the food by electric current? And there was some interesting stuff there around peripherals, or you could have a spoon or a utensil that you would eat with. interesting, but I think it was a cool applicability when you think about having to drive the sodium down, right? You can have a higher flavor of salt with a lower sodium content by using different peripherals. So that was interesting. I think as we look at food of the
By using different
like
peripherals, meaning
using
what?
a spoon, yeah, there's this.
Oh yeah, that can measure and know. An intelligent spoon.
Yes. So as you're eating
That's
it,
going to keep you from eating.
no, it's actually just sending a current, is how I understood. But yeah, I wish it would, because there's some food there, because we certainly sampled a lot of the automated ice cream machines and some of those, right? Um, so that was an interesting experience as well. There's a lot of the novelty space. There was a whole section around the robotic coffee, which again, the robotic arms. You had the robotic ice cream, robotic cotton candy.
That gets a lot of attention, but we've seen that at other shows and things before. I've seen them in Asia, certainly, and sometimes they find their way to CES from Asia. So
I think that was a bit of the play, was really around getting some US visibility around the space and applicability. I think in the food space, we saw some things around the smart kitchens, if you will, more on the consumer side. So what's in my refrigerator?
right,
What can tell me, based on the ingredients in the fridge, what should I order? What are some pieces around like the automated cooking, the sous vide cooking? So again, a lot of the consumer side, but we do see that in some of the industrial equipment we use in terms of the higher end machines that are doing batch cooking for the bigger volumes.
right. Well, I did say this is going to be a tale of two cities.
Yeah.
So there's a second city involved. That's Las Vegas. That's CES. But why don't we take a break for a moment? And AJ and I will continue the conversation. We'll talk about NRF, which would be New York City. And it was right after CES. So let's just take a break for a minute and we'll come right back.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
Well, welcome back. And I'm having a conversation about A Tale of Two Cities with AJ Francavilla, who is the Vice President of Digital and Innovation for North America for Sodexo. And that's really not what we're talking about. We're talking about different technologies that we've seen on the consumer side. And he shared with us, his experience at CES this year. But we're going to switch to the retail side because, for the last few years, the IFBTA has been very involved in helping to bridge that gap between retail and food service. And we've been doing that and showcasing that at the National Retail Federation show, their Retail's Big Show in New York, which coincidentally started the day after CES ended. So AJ was at both. So similarly to our conversation on CES. So give us the overview or the theme or what you walked around or felt, and then we can explore different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Rob, that the food zone was one of the best ones we've had so far. And I think that the footprint and the space, the sprawling, was really helpful in terms of looking at what was in the startup and the innovation space, what was really applicable to food, because it is a very big retail show. A few of the zones I thought were really interesting in the startup space was really around how folks are leveraging the smart shelves and some of the smart connections back for dynamic pricing or around the shelf tagging. So the interesting stuff there. When we went upstairs,
that's where we learn from retail.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's got applicability, right? As we think about products on the shelf and inventory, and even in our consumer packaged goods, there's so much there, and there's so much time invested in counting and inventory. There's automation that's available. That's fantastic because it just reduces those repetitive tasks. I think when we went upstairs, one of the other ones I thought was really interesting is around how AI is really becoming more ubiquitous to the industry. So when you think about loss prevention and heat mapping, and we've always had it. We've had the stereoscopic cameras. We've had the sensors. That's all great. But how do you know, without having to watch the whole feed, where there is theft, where there is a lie?
So to be very clear, so what I've seen in this is that, yes, we have had specialty cameras, but I think people are finding more uses today for using just the regular feeds you get off of security cameras to be able to analyze that data in different ways, not just for security.
Yep, exactly. So
if, by the way, if they really perfect that, and they perfect that using a tool that can sort through all those hours of stuff and pick out things, you actually could go backwards and run your past feeds, into it to see what trends you might have missed.
100%. I think that helps you with even just your floor stock, where you're putting the right products, where you have friction and dwell time. But when we saw the one around loss prevention and being able to chapterize it and just go in and say, okay, like, still a human's going to review and give the go, no go. Well, was there theft? Was there shrink? But that's huge because there's so much time that goes into that. And again, I think it's then gets us into a position where we can be more frictionless because now we know where our points are, that we have a bigger viability, where we can change some of the flow of the floor, to just add back to the guest, right? Because some of our spaces were designed and haven't been renovated yet. So now we can start going into a more hands-on experience with our guests and say, okay, hey, we're going to move this here. It's going to be more convenient. We can do a frictionless checkout over here because we've got this kind of flow, and our main, attended food area is here. So we're still watching. So it helps with space design too. But I think that the AI piece
and retail's used planograms forever on the placement of foods on shelves and things, but that's just as important as we think about, and they've done it in digital signage, so those are things that certainly we work and we learn from. So I'm sorry, you were going to.
No, I was to say, I think it then makes it more tangible, right? So now if we understand the floor, we understand the design, we can be more meaningful in our space, in our journey for our customers. But then it goes back to, where else are we seeing it, right? So now you have the shelf tags that are just in time for pricing. The right information is presented to the guest. It's also connected in back of house to our apps, our digital signage. So all of a sudden, all this data is now portable, right? It's all in this right spot at the right time. And we're not having to worry about touching more than one system because now it's all just being fed from one central area.
So two observations about that, because I was over at NAFM looking at food service equipment, and I noticed something there. But for the past 3 years at CES and at NRF, there are so many devices, and of course, IoT, is a common term that's used, but that's more the applications that are out there that are, riding the internet rail.
Yep.
But if you think about it, I saw some interesting things like, I forget what the term is for it, but electricity that comes from the light bulbs down in short term, so that now you do those shelf tags, you don't have to wire and you don't have to worry about recharging them, or you put something on the table side. Now, right now they're doing low voltage, so maybe it's charging your phone or a handheld terminal that you're using to take orders or whatever. But I think it's coming to where we have that wireless charging, but it's actually at a distance, not sitting down on a pad. That enables things like the shelf tags, or it enables us to have more technology run and not worry about charging, and swapping out, which will actually lower cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to your space design and what you're trying to get the messaging over to the guest, right? You're kind of in this when you're in a cafeteria, a cafe, maybe it's a bigger retail footprint. Those stores were designed in a different generation, right? But there's only so much power, PoE, you can also deliver. But these wireless ones we saw were really interesting around like the sneeze guards, right? If you're at a salad bar, now I can give you more customized messaging around the farmer, the locality.
You mean when you sneeze on the salad, you'll know whether you're sick or not, or go ahead and tell you what you need to do to feel better?
We did see some of that at some of the shows in the past. I think at NRA, which is a different conversation we'll have in the future. But we saw some stuff around the germs on your hands, right? Like that there's technology.
Absolutely.
But I mean, to your point, I think that's where you're starting to see like this crossover of like, this makes sense now. I can actually have, more messaging on the salad bar.
So I know that I'm joking about this, about knowing the health and wellness, but that is a huge area of the show of CES actually, but it's coming into our industry. And I know that we do this for sanitation for the hands, right? To know, that hands are clean and do the inspection checks and stuff. But it's not so funny, but I've seen in the past, both when I've gone over to Asia, but also at places like CES, the intelligent toilets that actually do analysis of what's deposited in them, and therefore can give you, health and recommendation. And over time, we probably will see more of that for both food safety, the health and wellness of our employees, and then protecting our guests, but also helping our guests to make healthy choices or be healthier based upon things that, they may tell us that they need a better diet or whatever it is. And we have to be connected into that.
No, I agree. I think that there's, again, it goes back to that practicality of the experience, right? So is it more readily available? Is it part of the routine? Is it just part of that journey? Because we've been talking about the guest journey for so long, right? what's going on back of house to make sure operations is getting some new tech, some new enhancements. And that just may be part of the journey when you think about, the sanitization process, are all of our food safety controls. Does that just become one of them in the future? It
Right.
becomes reduced in cost, and it just
All right. So look, besides shelf labeling and what you saw in the food service innovation zone itself, walking around NRF, were there some other things that just jumped out at you there that you thought, gee, that's really interesting? Why didn't we think of that? Maybe we should, talk to them about.
Yeah, I think there's a few areas, right? I saw a lot more of this kind of unified commerce piece, and that's been around, right? But I think the again, the rise of AI, the rise of personalization, all these things are coming together in that convergence. And I think that,
And you would hope that retail, above all, with e-commerce, would really get that one right.
correct. But now I know Rob is Rob, right? As you're dining with us in person, or you're dining with us remotely, or you're doing a pickup experience through frictionless walking in, walking out, all of a sudden you're getting more personalized data for you. That's going to help drive our purchasing as well, right? If you're not buying this product, then why are we going to keep serving up the same promotion to you? I think the other part of that was really around this whole kind of smart checkout, the frictionless. I mean, you saw a few years ago at NRF, it was a big boom around the in-store smart checkout. Then last year it was around the frictionless checkout. And now you're seeing this kind of blend of the two, where they're saying it's coming down in cost. And all of a sudden we can look at our stores and say, how do we create experiences designed to the journey for the customer? If they want to do frictionless, they can do frictionless. They want to walk up.
Yeah, by the way, I'd point out that you've said the word frictionless about 10 times, but you've also now started to use the word personalization. And those seem to be key themes for 2025.
Yeah.
Frictionless and personalization. AI is not necessarily a key theme because it seems to be
It's an enabler.
embedded.
Yeah.
It's embedded,
Yeah.
Everything that's back there. So let's just shift focus back between the two.
Yeah.
So you went there, obviously, I assume you didn't have to pay your own way to go to either one, that you went. And while you may not want to share trade secrets or the special sauce that you saw, what were the types of things that, if you go, you got to come back and report and say, here's what I saw. What were the key things? Because you can't tell them 100, so what were the key things that you brought back and you said, to those that couldn't go, and to me, are really from each one, what are the few things?
Yeah, so I think on the CES side, for me, it was really around where the industry is putting its big bets, and those big bets will translate into the commercial side. So there we saw a lot around the leveraging of the wearables and some of those pieces, and where we may have more applicability in the future to have a connected experience for our guests.
Right.
On the NRF side, I think where I saw a lot of movement was really around we're going to say the buzzword again, but it's the personalization. But I think going back to what you shared, it's that convergence of AI being the embedded experiences that's giving us the capability where we didn't have the speed to market in the past.
It is embedded, but AI also allows it to collect other data from external resources about you and your habits, even if it's not one-to-one, but about your habits through certain demographics and through the cameras and stuff, that now can bring those things to bear and say, let me layer this on top of what they do just with you, with other groups. And, that's what, it can do that analysis and make recommendations on a greater amount of data than you're ever going to have.
And it still could be anonymized, right? It doesn't have to be that crazy Big Brother. It could just be based on demographics, based on these behaviors. Now we can aggregate and say, most folks are going to want to have a latte at 2:00 if they haven't had it earlier in the week. And if they're in the store, we should service this up in this area. That's so much computing power.
Right. And that the tastes of those things are different by region, by international, by time of day, by, the 6 generations, whatever it's going to be, that you can actually sort it out that way.
I think that was one of the interesting talks, just jumping back to CES. And I know we're supposed to go towards the end.
No, we're good. No, we're good.
But on the CES side, that was one of the articles. And just as you were digging in post-show, I was following what was the trends that I didn't see when I was there, right? And one of the things was really around the wearables, but also how some pharmaceuticals and releases this past year around food, right, is starting to come into play around people's behaviors. So what are they doing at home? Well, it's driving up some wearables. That's driving up some connected devices. But that's also influencing how restaurants are changing their menu profiles, right? There may be more flexibility and some more indulgence.
You said that these are things that you did see, not things you didn't, right?
Things I may have missed when I was at the show, right?
Then you checked it post-show. I understand.
I was like, oh, that makes sense now, right? Because then I saw the wearable. We saw the wearables, but then connecting it back to why there was such a big push, because there are some talks at CES, right? There are some sessions, but you always have to make a calculated kind of decision.
Not, of course, there's only so much time. It's very large. So, from either event,
Yeah.
were there things that you expected to see that you really didn't? And it was sort of like, boy, I really thought I was going to see more of this, or I thought we'd be further along. Was there anything you had planned in advance? Gee, I'm going because I expect,
Yeah, I mean, I always go in with an open mind. I don't know if I go with the agenda because I want to see what's there and kind of be neutral to where I'm walking out. I think in CES, more so, I'm more kind of let's just see what's there because the pendulum swings. On the CES side, I think I saw less robotics than I have in the past. And I'm saying true robotics, not automation, things like that.
No, I understand.
The big arm moving around and the things doing tasks, right? There wasn't that big push where we've seen it in the last 2 or 3 years.
And I would tell you, by the way, on robotics, I'm going to all these events and I'm seeing very little front of the house robotics anymore, where every show had, bringing the trays out and stuff. But it's mostly behind the scenes, that's doing in certain specific tasks.
Yeah. And I would even say in the behind the house, it's not necessarily like in air quotes robotics. It's more automation now, right? So
yes,
there's the theater of robotics and there's automation. So I think I'm aligned there. I think on the NRF side, it was you're seeing a lot more of that portability of the retailing experience, right? So instead of those brick and mortar walk up to this cash stand, this cash wrap, you're seeing folks on the floor. So more around like handhelds, more around the frictionless. I know that word again, but like, how do I meet you where it is, right? How do I meet you if you're on the floor and you're shopping for something? Let me check you out right there and get you on your way. I saw a lot more of that this year, and I think the booths have also pivoted to be more designed towards that flexibility of meeting the consumer where they are.
So I just want to make sure I heard something that you said, because I think it's quotable. I might actually steal this one from you. Did you say the theater of robotics?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that's a very good way to say it, because really the pivot term there might be more of automation, because it really is a number of things that come together, and the robotics piece is just one part. But I think that that's a really good way of saying that. But it's really about automation out there, and I think that's it. So we need to wrap up, and I know that we could have a lot of conversations. We will have a lot of conversations continued on this, because it's always good to do this. All right, but I know that you went there as part of the job, but we all know that we go to these things also just to see. So, in your personal side of things, is if I got to buy you a birthday present coming up, what did you see that just wowed you and said, I don't really care if it's, $100,000 TV, whatever it is. Okay. What did you see there on the personal side that you just said, boy, if I have a list, boy, I hope I'm going to get that.
Yeah. So I'm taking my Sodexo hat off for a second. And it's going to be completely my lens, but I think there was amazing screens coming out for television, and I'm a huge television person. Love watching series and shows. So, as you know, lots of time on a plane, so that stuff gets moved to my iPad.
So, what's the definition of an amazing screen?
So some of these screens are just the quality, the transparency, and what they can do in terms of being kind of embedded inside of your home, right? It's not just this big screen that's sitting on a wall. It's translucent. It looks like a picture frame. So there's some really cool stuff coming out in huge form factor. And again, I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I would love that 85-inch screen, but someone may start asking questions. So that was one. I think the other one was around some of the connected vehicles and the EVs. There were some really cool cars, and I have a favorite over there with a big price tag. So Rob, I will send you the link. You let me know. I'm happy to have that.
I'm always you're happy to see one show up in your driveway. I get that. I always like looking at any kind of tech in a car. Certainly there's a lot of expensive, but the impression I always got out of that is I haven't heard of half these makers, of people that are doing things there. And screens, I always follow the screens, but it's funny. Sometimes things are out there before their time, and I got really excited. I can't tell you, it's got to be 10, 12 years ago when they were showing all the screens were about 3D television.
Yeah.
And boy, whatever happened to that, right? You're going to be able to see the sporting event right in front of you. And then they even showed some that I'm waiting really for the 3D or the holographic. It's going to change the way they film, of course, display in front of you. So when we watch those sporting events and we're starting to see sports arenas, people like Cosm doing this and others, that bring that experience in front of you as if you're there, but you're not really there. And we'll start seeing movies and being part of it, at some point. But that came and went. And so, it'll come back.
Few providers there that did some interesting stuff with multiple layers of screens that were translucent, and then they were creating the 3D experience from there.
I've actually seen that before.
And it was interesting.
Yeah.
But again, the form factors are still about this big, right?
Right. By the way, when I saw some of the big ones the year before, they were showing them in a stadium or arena, looking out over the game and being able to see on the screen what's happening, but also the stats coming up as you're looking through the glass.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I get this. Well, look.
But that's a great, one nugget. That's the crossover, right? That's the crossover from CES kind of consumer grade coming into that commercial setting.
Absolutely.
Design experiences. So great.
Well, look, I appreciate, you're sharing it with, we're going to have to walk the show together.
Yeah.
Although I will tell you that one of the things that I've thought about is we know that there's an Asian CES and there's some other ones around the world. I'd love to go to, when they do the phone arenas and stuff, different part, because what comes out, it's not really a phone, it's a handheld automation, not robotics. But, I'd be curious to do that, but it's always good to do it in real time and share. But I really appreciate your joining me in conversation, today on this, which I know will continue in the future as well.
Absolutely.
So AJ Francavilla, who is the Vice President Digital and Innovation for North America for Sodexo, has joined me in a conversation about everything except for Sodexo. And, thank you for joining us on TechBytes and sharing your tale of two cities.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.